me without you. You are my dream. You're what dreams are made for. You are my dream. We're a three-strand cord.
Yeah. Can you feel the rhythm of the soul? That's the heartbeats, let's go. Dive in with its riches untold. Let the greatest love story unfold. And yeah, all I know, I can't fall back. God pinned the format, officiated the first wedding and all that. So I'm all strapped with love stories that recall back times we made it to the light when it looked all black. Hashtag relationship goals. Let's go where God wants us to go. We ain't gotta drive, it's just scored, it's outside. In His grace we can fly, there's really no downside. Can we dance to His heartbeat? Be quiet when His heart speaks. Come on, be honest when our heart meets. As we listen to our heartbeats.
You are my dream. There's no me without you.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Heartbeats podcast. I'm your host, Ruth Kogan, and I want to thank you all for joining me on the podcast all about love. Specifically, and most importantly, the love God has for us as demonstrated in how He brings two people together for marriage and how He has loving upon His singles. And I just, I got to emphasize this point that it really is about God. This podcast, as much as I love love, if you know me, I love love. But this is not simply just about love stories. It really is pointing to the God who orchestrates those love stories. And so I love, as much as I love love, I just love stories, period, that reflect the heart of our God, that reflect His power, His faithfulness, His presence, His orchestrating hand, His providence in our lives. And so I pray that this podcast just impresses that more and more on you, that God is in charge and working all things out for your good and His glory in your life. So I pray that it opens your eyes to see Him at work in greater and more in-depth ways than perhaps you've ever noticed. And share your stories. Okay? Even if it seems quote unquote small, all right? Share your stories. So this week, I am excited to introduce to you all a beautiful couple, Mike and Beth Buell. I know them through my dear friend, Kim Tastic. That's what I call her. That's not her full name. Shout out to my friend Kim, a dear friend of mine from New York, who said, no, you have got to interview my aunt and uncle. And they just have a beautiful story of how God brought them together, how He brought beauty from ashes, all those things, how He did miracles, straight up miracles for them. So I won't delay any longer, other than just to say this. As you listen to their story, pay attention to what sticks out to you about their story. What are those details that really you can't get rid of? You just notice and they pop into your head. Around here, we call that your heartbeat, which is what is God speaking to you as you are listening to their story. Okay, because He uses stories, as I said earlier, to demonstrate powerful truths about Himself. And He wants to encourage you. He wants to stir and build your faith. Okay, so with that said, oh yeah, and stay around for the after party, which is where I share my heartbeat. So what was God saying to me as I heard their story and talked with them? So with that said, y'all, let's meet the Buells. All right, Mike and Beth, welcome to the Heartbeats podcast.
Hi, Ruth. How are you?
Good. So happy to see you. You guys are in sunny California, right?
Yeah, but it's not sunny right now.
The irony is in Michigan, it's sunny and it's rarely sunny in the winter. So
Nice.
sorry about it. So I know you all through a mutual connection. One of my dear, dear friends, Kim, from my time in New York City. That is your niece.
Yes,
Yes.
my niece.
My niece, and she's told me so much about you guys. So why don't y'all introduce yourselves? What should we know about Mike and Beth?
Well, I'm retired, and I don't know what you should know about me, but I'm through cancer right now, so I do want to say that because God has been so gracious through that, and that's a big part of my life, and
Yeah.
He's done. And so, but I'm retired, so which is awesome, and so we just kind of hang out, and we do travel a little bit, as much as we can. We love to camp and stuff, see family and stuff like that. So that's
Amazing.
not too much excitement over here.
What about you, Mike? What should we know about you? In addition to what Beth shared.
I'm retired too.
Hey, nice.
So it's kind of different being retired. You have to, I usually try to plan something every day, something I need to do, even if it's just
Beth.
get me up and get going. And
Yep,
there's always more to do. There's always plenty. So
absolutely. And how long have you guys been married?
We'll be married 40 years a couple weeks. On the 19th, we'll be married 40 years.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh, wow. And you guys have how many kids?
Two boys. See, Kim is my niece. My sister had 4 girls and I had 2 boys. So my boys are also her boys and her girls are all my girls.
Right, exactly.
So
Oh, awesome. Well, let's just get right into your story. Can you share with each of us? You've been married for 40 years. So let's go back to prior to that. Where were each of you at? What was going on with y'all's lives before you all actually met?
do you want me to go first?
I don't care.
Yes, dear. I was raised in a religious home. So I was taught religion and morals and ethics. And so I'm very grateful for that. But they didn't teach Jesus at my house.
Mhm.
So I knew God, but I didn't really understand a God. Bad things happen to everybody.
Right.
In my life, a couple things happened that were very disappointing, considering they came from people who should know better, who still betrayed my trust and confidence. And so that's kind of how I had a great childhood, but still those things interrupt that. And so when I met Mike, I was a good girl in my own opinion. I would call myself a Christian because I didn't understand what it meant.
Right.
Because I knew a God, I didn't know Jesus as my Lord and Savior. And so there's a big difference there.
Right.
So when I met Mike, by that time I had a child. I was, like I said, I was mostly a good girl, quote, quote, but being a good girl and having some sense of morality doesn't take care of everything. And so I ended up having a baby. I was smart enough and grateful for my training in religion because I knew not to have an abortion. And that was, I have to say, even though I didn't know Jesus, God still watched out for me all along as I was growing up. And as I was a young adult, I ended up with a babysitter who was Christian.
Oh, wow.
And I knew she was a Christian, but all I cared about was, oh, good, she'll be nice to my son while I have to go to work. And she was very good, but she also watched him for me. She volunteered to watch him for me at night when I would go out with the girl. And because she knew I was going to be drinking and she didn't want me to come pick him up drunk and drive home with him. So she was such a blessing and volunteered to watch him all night and then pick him up. So like I said, God was watching out for me before I knew him. So then when I met Mike, I was working at a bank, and I was the assistant manager, and he is an electrician. So we were having remodeling in our bank. Well, my manager, of course, didn't want to have to get up and be at the bank at 7 a.m. So I got volunteered. But I had to meet Mike and his foreman to do that and to let them in, set off the alarms, and get started. So that's how we met.
Okay. And how old, can you give us just a, like, how old were you around this time?
I was 21.
Okay.
29.
You were 29?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So Beth, you kind of brought us to, you met at work, sounds
Yes.
like. Okay. So Mike, what was happening in your life before you met Beth?
Well, I was raised in a Christian family who loved the Lord and always took us to church, and we had good upbringing as kids. And I did love the Lord. I'd already given my heart to him. And I got called into the service during the Vietnam time. And so I was in the Coast Guard 4 years, and I got out of the Coast Guard, and right away I met this girl who I thought was really nice, was from our church. And we ended up getting married just like 6-8 months later. And then for different reasons, she was very unhappy and she didn't want to stay married. But to me, marriage was very important because,
Right.
you know, I'd been brought up that way, and I tried everything I could to change it, and I couldn't. Ended up divorcing me and leaving. So I have my own place I live. And so I told the Lord, I'm just going to stay away from women. I'm not going to date. I'm not going to do anything until you show me where did I go wrong? What happened?
Wow.
Fail. And so anyway, I wasn't going to look for any girls. I wasn't dating or anything. And then I met Beth at work because of work. And we ended up with my partner that was with me. We would go out to lunch once a week and have lunch, talk about the job and our lives and whatever. And so then after that, we just started sort of dating. And then I got to where the point where I knew she wasn't a Christian, and I told her I didn't believe in sleeping together ahead of time out of marriage. And she agreed with me. She said, okay, that's fine, as long as I know, why you feel that way. And so that didn't hurt anything. And then a few months later, I was praying to the Lord, and I'd worked out of town, and I decided I was going to break up with her because things weren't changing. And she, I knew I couldn't marry a non-Christian. Just that would be a bad thing. I'd already gone through one marriage that was bad. And so I told the Lord I was gonna, as soon as I got home, I was driving home from working, and so when I get home, I'm gonna go talk to her and tell her that we have to break it off because it's just gonna get harder and harder. And by the time I got home, I got a phone call from her. As soon as I came in the house, she was at the hospital. Her son had fallen in a pool, and they didn't know if he was going to make it. And I thought, great. Here I was going to break up with her, and now her son is on the edge of death. And so I thought, okay, Lord, I can't break up with her right now, but I'll do it later. But later never came.
Wow.
Well, that's because that part of the story is amazing. I don't know if it fits in now.
You can share it. No, go ahead.
My babysitter was like 9 months pregnant, and she also worked for an electrician at his home doing his books. And they treated my son, all of them, like they were like the grandparents.
Right.
So she would take him to their house, and they would visit and hang out. And she would do her work, and and Brian, my son, was there too. And so one day they went out by the pool for a break, and they were throwing the football to my son. And the babysitter went back in the house, and the man stayed out there with Brian. Well, 20 minutes later, she sees him walking through the house, and then after another 10 minutes, she says, well, where's Brian? And he goes, well, I don't know. What do you mean? And she goes, I left him out there with you. And so they went running out there, and he's at the bottom of the pool. And
Oh
so,
my gosh.
of course, they called 911, jumped in and got him out, and they tried CPR, but none of them knew how. And the paramedic came, and he saw them praying, and he said, she said, do you mind if I pray over him before I resuscitate him? And he said, no, go ahead. So he did. The paramedic prayed for him, and then he resuscitated him, and
Wow.
to resuscitate him. So then they took him to the hospital, of course. Well, all I get is a call from work saying, your son's at the hospital. He fell in the pool and drowned. Like, is he okay? I mean,
My gosh. Right.
all they said was, you just have to get over to the hospital. So somebody drove me over there, and on the way over, I prayed, because I had been going to church with Mike, and his God was different from my God. I understand why. I mean, I heard the gospel, heard the messages, the come forward messages and
Right.
back to Jesus, but I had bad experiences with God,
Yeah.
I was thinking and praying on my way down there that, okay, God, you're just going to have to show me. I was talking to Mike's God,
Right.
God, you're going to have to show me that you truly are God. And I'm a single mom, and I cannot have a brain damaged child. I said, because I can't deal with that, and you know what I need. And so if he's perfect, then I'll know you're the true God. And then I will give my life to you. And, as a Christian later, you kind of cringe a little bit, but God knew where I was at.
He knew where you were at. Yes.
Yeah, where you're at. And so I go to the hospital, and they won't let me see him because they're taking water out of his blood or something. I don't know what they're doing, or I don't, but they were doing something, and I couldn't see him. But the doctor finally came out, and I said, well, how is he? And he goes, he's good. He's doing okay. And I said, well, is he going to have brain damage or anything? And he goes, well, I don't know. He was only 2. And he said, I can't tell you that yet, because, he's 2, so I can't really talk to him that much. And every time I ask him how old he is, he tells me he's 5. Laughing, I said, he always tells you he's 5.
Right.
For whatever reason, he always told you. And so then I just went into the corner, because I knew that was God telling me he was fine. And so the corner, and I just prayed and said, Lord, you are God, you are God, and so today I give you my life.
Wow.
And Mike wasn't at the hospital at this point, so he didn't really know that's what I had done at that point. And then that's when I called him, and he came over. So, but my son, after the checkups, the doctor said he might get a B on a report card other than an A, but he's fine. And today he's I'm not a youth pastor. He's an associate pastor at a small church in Southern California. So it's
Wow.
just what God can do.
Absolutely.
It's just amazing. And so
Wow.
I was talking about that I wasn't a Christian, but now I was, and then I didn't know how to tell him,
Right.
It was very odd. I didn't know how to tell him how that happened. So
Wow. So I want us to come back to that moment, because that's a significant moment in your all's story. And I'd love to hear a little bit too, like, Beth, you had some experiences before you met Mike. And Mike, you were in a prior marriage before meeting Beth. Did either of you have was that a struggle for either one of you in terms of being in a relationship again? Like, was there any hesitancy, or were you scared at all to like enter into this new relationship?
Yeah, I was scared.
yeah, Mike was.
I just didn't want it to go bad again.
Right.
Get started and then have it die out or whatever. And I wasn't quite sure exactly why my first marriage died and how to change it. And so I just wanted to be slow and not rush. Beth said I was too slow.
Yes.
But
Too slow.
probably, but I had to be sure in my heart that
Sure.
the Lord wanted.
Yep.
When
Yeah.
I first asked her to marry me, I was ready.
Right.
He asked me in December, and I said, well, did you? Oh, and of course I accepted, so But then I said, well, when do you want to get married? You want to get married, July, June, July? I guess we can get married next week. So we ended up getting married February. So it was like, he didn't want a big wedding. I didn't care. I wanted him. So I was going to get whatever I could get. And I don't ever regret that decision. So, but I wasn't nervous at all. But when my son fell in the pool and after I became a Christian, it didn't take me too much longer to realize that I was in love with him and wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. So I was anxious for a while because I was afraid he would leave me and not love me and not marry me. And although he was not making any signs of that because he was stalling, but he explained it to me. And so finally I just prayed and I said, Lord, I have two choices. I can either wait for him to be ready and take my chances, or I can leave him now. And I just could not get the answer to leave him. I did not want to, and that's not what the Lord was telling me. So I just around and I was happy. I was very content because the Lord took care of all that in my life. And it was so awesome to see that in myself and allow myself to just rest and do the work, because I could have just as easily as blown him off and said, okay, I'm done, because I'm not going to. We were, like I said, it was after I waited another year before we actually got married. And so to me, that was a long time, but to him, it was the right time. So what do you do?
Sure. Right. That's such an interesting point about, like you couldn't, I love what you're saying, Beth, about like, you could not force it.
Yeah.
And nor do you want to, right? At the end of the day, like, because both of you want to be entering in, like, this is what we want and we both believe this is what God wants for us. You don't want it lopsided with that. So that wisdom of I'm waiting and I'm going to let God do the work. And
what a pressure that took off me though, too, because it's like, I don't have to do anything to try to convince Mike to marry me. It's not my job to do that. So.
Right. Wow. So Mike, for you, were there any significant moments for you that let you know, okay, now is the time. Like this is the woman I want to be with, and this is what God wants. How did you know that for yourself?
It just felt right after a while. I bought a ring and I thought I'm going to give it to her at Christmas that year. I bought it a couple months before, and I prayed about it. I said, Lord, I'm going to ask her to marry me. So, if this isn't right, stop it now. Felt right.
I got it on Christmas.
And I love that you, so it sounds like Mike, when you were ready, you was, like Beth said, you was ready. Like
I was ready. I felt this is what the Lord wanted. And that's why when she was asking me about how long do you want to wait till the end of the year, or you want to wait till summer, I thought, I don't know, we can go next week if you want. I don't care. I'm ready to be married. And that feels right.
I love that. So God, God worked on his heart, not just to propose, but let's go. I love that. So before we kind of move into your all's marriage piece, I'd love to know what drew you to each other in the first place. So what stood out to you about Beth? What stood out to you about Mike?
Go ahead.
I thought she was pretty. And I had to deal with her at work day in and day out for a while. So I just kind of got to know her a little bit. And I don't know. I just like being with her, and I guess I'll go slow.
Yep. Enjoyed her presence though. That's key. Yeah. What about you, Beth?
Well, I thought Mike was too good to be true. And then because he was so nice all the time, and he was very kind, and he never didn't swear. And I was used to swearing, especially from construction guys, right?
Right.
And he was always a gentleman, and I loved what he said about his life. But there's only one thing that bothered me is he couldn't go out on Wednesday nights. And at first he didn't tell me why, and I didn't want to ask. And then, but my friend I worked with, her husband went to Alcoholics Anonymous on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking to myself, great, he's an alcoholic. He's not this perfect man, perfect in every way, but he's an alcoholic. And then later he told me, you know, I go to church Wednesday night. And I just had a good laugh about that, because I thought, okay, I can deal with church. I can deal with Alcoholics Anonymous too. But, you know, it was just like, oh, so that's what his problem is. But it was pretty funny. But he is actually was going to church. And at that point in our relationship, when he first told me, he didn't quite know how to, he knew I didn't go to church, and especially on Wednesday nights. So, and so that was why I guess that's why he didn't tell me. I don't know why. It just didn't come up, I guess.
Yeah, it didn't come up. And I didn't know if you'd understand.
Yeah.
Somebody who's in the middle of the week. But,
Right.
well, I can't on Wednesdays, but I can go out another day.
Yeah.
And then she finally, one time, she looked at me with a funny look on her face and says, "Now, why is it you can't go out on Wednesdays?" I said, "Well, I go to church. So I don't want to skip that day."
Right.
But she laughed. Oh, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
That, and you know what? It's just, I'm laughing too, because I think that's so typical of when something is too good to be true, aka God ordained, right? When God brings something beautiful about, we tend, at least I do, tend to throw in some sort of negative shade, like, oh wait, there must be a catch here somewhere. And when it's a move of God, you know, he's like, no, I do beautiful things. And we tend to fill it in with, what's the catch? So
at this point, I'm still not saved, so I don't really understand how he could be. I don't understand that that's God and that's the Holy Spirit, and that's how come I'm so attracted to him. So so it's just that, it's that in play, and again, back to God watching over me even before I knew him.
Wow, that's a beautiful statement. Yeah. His watchful care over us even when we aren't acknowledging him.
Yes.
That doesn't negate his presence or his activity in our lives. It's just, are we acknowledging it? So wow. So I want us to shift, and you know, I shared before, season 2 we're focusing on redemptive challenges. So something specific that you all have dealt with in your marriage, a challenge you all have faced in your marriage, that God has helped you through or is helping you through, however you want to answer that. So I'm curious for you all, how would you respond to what's a challenge y'all have faced in your marriage that God has helped you overcome or work through? And you guys can have different answers as well.
For me, we had, it was when we were married, I want to say about 7 or 8 years. And all of a sudden I felt oppression, and I didn't understand where it was coming from. And I felt like, you know how I meant to look up that scripture where God is holding your hand or something by the hand.
Right.
God had stepped away, and so my hand was not there, and that impacted our relationship. I was really upset with him all the time, not understanding why. I still felt like I loved him. I didn't want a divorce, but finally I just couldn't stand it, and I left. And so and that was devastating, because number one, that's not what I wanted to do.
Right.
How to get out of that predicament. I felt like God let go of my hand, and so I didn't know who he was. And so I ended up moving out, and Mike was really good about it. Of course he didn't like it, but you know, he couldn't stop me. And I started going to counseling, and I got a Christian counseling, which you normally don't get on because I had to go through my insurance. And so a Christian counselor, and I told him, I said, I don't really want drugs because I don't believe in drugs, but I don't know what's wrong with me. And I got, you know, and so long story short, I had clinical depression. Know it, And so that impacts your brain chemistry.
Right.
And that was what was happening. But as I was alone, I hated it. But I felt like that's where I needed to be to work this out for myself so then I could go back into the marriage. And so I can't remember if then we started going to marriage to the counselor.
One time.
Oh, we only went once?
Yeah, and then I didn't go back. I didn't know you kept going.
Oh, okay. So anyway, I did get drugs, and I know a lot of people don't like Christians to take antidepressants. And I do want to share my thoughts on that because
please.
I believe that God can heal anything, but I also was afraid of how much damage I would do. He was doing the healing. Not that he couldn't take care of that too, he could. But one thing that comes to my mind always is diabetes. When people have diabetes, we give them insulin because their pancreas is not producing the right chemicals in the body. So why can I not take an antidepressant? Because my brain was messed up, my brain chemicals. And so so I did take the antidepressants, and of course they take time, but then they started working, and then all of a sudden I felt like, wait, here's God back. How is God back? It had nothing to do with the that he was ever gone. He wasn't.
Right.
But my brain was telling me that he was gone. And so once I could kind of get that straightened out, and all this time, you know, I'm praying and I'm asking God, crying out, why is this happening and what? But we had gone to counseling, and so then I can't even remember how we decided to get back together. It was just time. It was like my brain was finally working correctly.
You called and asked me if I wanted to meet you for dinner.
Yeah.
I said okay, and then I thought, oh, she's going to tell me that she doesn't want to get back together and she wants a divorce. That's what I was thinking. And that's not why you called me.
I wanted to get back together, and I wanted to make sure he was okay with that. And so I think within a week I had moved back home. And, but that God, and then after that in our marriage, we did go to counseling, a couple counseling sessions, but the major problem was me and my depression, and Mike didn't recognize it either. Communication was a little bit not as good as it could have been prior to that, but after that, communication was really awesome. We could communicate so much better, I feel, and Mike was more open. His family never communicated real well when they were young. My family, what you see is what you get, and I'm going to tell you, you know, so but that, and so that was our biggest challenge, was communication. And once that worked out, then after that we were perfectly happy. I don't ever remember, I don't know what you're going to talk about, but for me, that was our marriage has been awesome, and it's only because it was laid on the foundation of God.
Right.
And there was no other foundation. You know, we were friends. We didn't have sex before we got married, which I was really upset about, because as being in the world, that's what you think is supposed to happen. And if he doesn't want to have sex with me, then that obviously means he doesn't love me. And if I can get him to bed with me, then that means I've kind of got my hooks in him and he has to stay.
Yep.
The mindset of an unsaved person.
Yeah.
And so when he finally told me why he didn't want to, then I understood, and then I could say, okay, and I could step back. But again, that's God working in my heart before I even knew him. That was okay that way. And then I was content to wait for him and to wait and see how the relationship, you know, carried forth. But after that, we've never been arguers. I tried to make him sleep on the bed one night, out on the couch one night. He said, no, I'm not doing it. I said, what? I was totally annoyed with him for not going to sleep on the couch. I'm glad now he didn't do it. So, but it was pretty funny. So
that's awesome.
First date, really, aside from we had little lunches together at work, but I wanted to ask her out, and I prayed to the Lord. I said, Lord, I'm going to ask her out unless you do something to change my mind or change things. I'm going to ask her out because it just seems right. And then I called her and asked her if she wanted to go out on this coming Saturday. And she said, okay, at first. And then I don't know if she called me back or what later on. And she said, I'm going to have to cancel on Saturday. I can't go out. And I thought, well, here's the Lord.
The block.
Turn her away to where
Yeah.
she doesn't go out or whatever. And I said, well, okay. And she said, yeah, she goes, I just can't afford to hire a babysitter for the day. And I just don't have the money this month. And I said, oh, well, I was planning on taking, that's why I'd asked her if she wanted to go to the zoo.
Wow.
I did.
But I said, well, I picked the zoo because I figure with Brian, we could put him in a little stroller or something and spend the day looking at all the animals and it'd be fun. So she goes, oh, well, I guess I can go.
So funny for me. See, again, that was before I knew the Lord, and most guys don't want to take out the baby.
Sure.
Well, he was a year and a half or a year old, or year and a half.
Yeah.
But that was Mike's plan, and so that spoke to my heart too. That he was not going to date just me,
right?
My child, and accept my child, and
absolutely.
So yeah, it was amazing. I was totally amazed. So
wow, that's beautiful, y'all. I love your all's story. I love I feel a repeated theme of just, kind of God was overseeing things before even though we weren't even aware of it at times, that he was overseeing, working in our hearts, working in our desires. Mike, how you said it just seemed right to me. And a friend of mine a few years ago, she wrote on a Post-it. I actually found the Post-it about 8 months ago, as I was actually moved out of New York City. So I lived in New York for many years. That's how I met your niece Kim. And I was cleaning out and I found this Post-it, and the Post-it said something along the lines of, when a man walks in close fellowship with the Lord, the desires of his heart match God's will. And that really struck me. It was something she and I were literally talking about. And then I found that Post-it. It really just like confirmed. But Mike, I that's what I think of when you talked about, like, you were seeking after the Lord. You were walking with God. You were, in close fellowship with him. Right. And so it's like God put that desire in you for Beth, for Brian, for that family. And so you kept checking in, but at the end of the day, it was just there. That desire was there. And you were walking with the Lord, kept walking with him. So I just love that, that God moves and speaks in a variety of ways. And for you, I just love that simple phrase of, it just seemed right. It was there. So yeah, that's beautiful. I just want to wrap up with this question. This is the question that I ask all the couples. What's something your spouse does that makes your heart beat?
You want me to go first?
Go ahead.
My husband cares for me deeply and does a lot of different things for me. But when the first time I had cancer and I had a mastectomy, and that was devastating. I was 39. And so at 39, that's devastating. And I just cried, and I couldn't take a shower because our shower had mirrors that I had to look in the mirrors, and I just cried every night. I just could not deal with the shower. And so finally one night I just said, oh, I have to go take a shower. And Mike goes, okay, well, just a minute, I need to go to the bathroom. So he goes into the bathroom, and I thought I was just going to the bathroom. And so he comes out, and so I get my stuff and I walk in the bathroom, and he has placed towels over and fixed over the mirrors. So I can look at it, and that makes me cry.
Wow.
But that's what my husband does. He quietly
Yes.
takes such good care of me. And so that's my heartbeat, is that he quietly takes care of me. He's not a, really outgoing and, crash and burn and cymbals and balloons. And he's not confetti, but he quietly always takes care of me and has always done so. And so that's what makes my heart.
That's beautiful. Well put. Thank you. What about you, Mike?
Well, kind of the same. She always takes care of me and thinks about me, and she's always had the house cleaned up and the kitchen, neat, and food on the table, and all the things you kind of depend on, and she's never complained about it. So she's loved me, and I always felt like she loved me.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you all so much. I just appreciate you all taking the time. I'm reflecting on it, just the things that I heard about the power of prayer, about God's redemption. God brings beauty from ashes, and just to see, how God brought a blessing in one another when you both had been through so much prior to knowing one another. And his, I was just thinking about the challenge, Beth, that you shared with clinical depression, and in God's grace, using that as a way to bring awareness to it, first of all, but also sharpen your communication and help you all transform that in a much healthier way. God's overarching hand over your all's lives is a beautiful testimony. So I appreciate it. And I look forward to catching up with you all again. Thank you so much.
Okay, Ruth, thank you for letting us tell our story.
Yeah, my pleasure and honor. And I hope you all get some sunshine soon. So
yes. Okay.
You all have a good evening or afternoon for you guys.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Well, we are at the part of the episode where I share my heartbeat, which is, what did I sense God speaking to me as I listened to Mike and Beth share their story? And of course, at the end, you heard me rattle off a few things, but one thing I did not mention is this part, and that is rest. The word rest. And Beth really highlighted this piece where she wanted to get married. She was ready. It was like, well, this is go time. But Mike wasn't there. He needed more time to be sure. And she waited. Well, first she prayed. And then she waited and rested. And knowing she really ain't in charge. She cannot convince Mike of anything. She can't force his hand. She can't make anything happen. And honestly, I think that is such an important lesson for all of us. And I do feel like God takes us through these seasons where he's like, I want you to rest. I want you to recognize you ain't in charge. I want you to recognize you can't make anything happen. So don't fight me on it. You know how we get into these little tantrums with God, like, he's like, sit down, child. But it's for our good. It's for just rest. You don't have to be anxious about it. I'm inviting you not to be anxious. I'm inviting you to put this situation into my hands and let me do it. And I'm going to make it even better than what you thought. Because y'all don't miss what happened. When Mike was ready, he was ready. He was like, let's get married next week. Like, let's go. So when it's God's time, it's a go time. And so he will often move fast, suddenly, swiftly. Pick your word. But prior to that, he's like, I want you to rest. I want you to rest. Pray, wait, rest, knowing I got it. And when I bring it about, it's the right time. It's the best time, and it's go time. So, y'all, as you sit to this week and think on what is God asking you to rest in him about, that means you don't need to be anxious. You don't need to worry. You can trust that when God's time is right, he gonna make it happen, and he gonna make it good. All right. Thank you all for joining us this week, and I look forward to being with you all in a couple of weeks for another episode of Heartbeat.
You are my dream. Yeah. There's no me without you. You are my dream. Yeah. You're what dreams are made for. You are my dream. We're a three-strand cord. When I saw you, my heart skipped a beat.
When I saw you, my heart felt complete, yeah.
But I wasn't ready to speak.
So I took the first word I was ready to greet.
But God knew
Shot my
we
shot,
were
baby.
meant to be.
I knew we were meant to be, yeah. We were meant to be, yeah. We were meant to be. God knows.
Can you feel my heart